As many of you know who are attending the conference today, my name is Dr. Patricia Lanzon. I am the Pre-Education Program Director at Henry Ford College, as well as a faculty chair and a faculty member. This is my 22nd conference at Henry Ford College, and it is the 6th conference that I have put on in my career there. So I want to welcome all of you. I also want to tell you that I'm very happy to see all of you here. I recognize that this is a Zoom conference, and for many of you who have come to our previous concerts, being on campus is obviously a lot of fun, and we have a lot of energy. So I'm hoping today that you come to this conference with some energy, because we're thankful to have you here. We recognize, all of us recognize, that the whole world is about zoomed out. And I appreciate all of you for attending this Zoom conference. And we have great presenters today. So to get that started, I'm going to go over the agenda. Our first speaker today will be Dr. Michael McVey. He's our keynote, and he's quite amazing. So I'm very proud to have him today. And following our keynote, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And then we're going to come back, and you're going to choose breakout rooms. We have 3 breakout rooms for you to choose from, and you can move between them. But you have to remember, the sessions are only 30 minutes each. So if you leave a session, you're going to miss something from the other session. So try to pick, a session that is a really good fit for you. So we have the yellow breakout room with Mrs. Laura Rowe, and she is going to be speaking on shifting gears in pre-K and incorporating tech along the way. Quite an energetic professor here at Henry Ford. She is also a teacher in Dearborn Public Schools. We have the blue breakout room with Miss Samaya Beydoun, and Miss Beydoun was a former student of mine many years ago, and she is going to be presenting on arts and crafts and technology too. Then we have the green breakout room, and that's with Mr. Stephen Baroni, and he is our science professor for education here at Henry Ford College. He's going to be presenting hands-on science experiments over Zoom, easy as 1, 2, 3. And then we have our secondary presenter. Oh, that's our first set of breakout rooms. So you'll attend that from 10 o'clock till 10:30 a.m. At 10:35, we're going to begin our second breakout rooms, and you're going to choose between the purple breakout room or the orange breakout room. So the purple breakout room is with Mr. Matthew Rauschio, and he's going to be presenting on creating generation content creators. And he's also an amazing professor here at Henry Ford. And we have Dr. Katie Beleja, and she's going to be presenting from the secondary perspective on engaging learners with technology. Following that, we're going to have a break, and then I will be presenting on universal design for learning. After my presentation, we're going to have a 15-minute Q&A session, and you will be able to ask all of the panelists any questions that you would like. So you'll actually get to hear from panelists that you didn't get to go to their presentation today. Then we're going to have the closing remarks, and the raffle winners will be announced. So during the course of today, I'm going to do a little data sort with the attendees' names, and there'll be some random people chosen. There will be at least 10 raffle winners today. So you have to stay till the end of the conference, though, to win your raffle. So I hope everybody can do that. There are some tips for online conferencing that I'd like to go over. First off, keep an open mind. There is a lot of learning that can happen virtually. And I know all of you are learning virtually right now. But I ask you, just to keep an open mind and think in terms of all the time and effort that all these presenters have put into teaching you some new teaching techniques. Minimize the distractions during the sessions. As we've talked about before, keep your mic off unless you raise your hand or you put in the chat that you have a question. I'll try to answer those as they come about. And I'll try to do them in order as I notice them. Put a screen behind you if you don't feel comfortable for the attendees seeing your background. Keep your camera on if you'd like. I love it when my students keep their cameras on because it makes me look at you and it makes me actually feel like I'm with human beings. So please keep that camera on so we can go, oh, look, people are engaged. I'm not talking to, I don't know, Pluto. So we don't want to talk to Pluto. We want to talk to you. And we want your engagement. We want your questions. Actively participate during the sessions by either raising your hand and you can click on the little hand button, or using the chat tool. You can copy and paste questions in there if you would like. And as I said before, presenters love the engagement and questions will get asked in order. If you're having technology issues like your screen freezing, just log out and log back in and you will be let back into the conference as soon as possible. Engage in the polls. We're going to try to have some of those posted up as we go along during the conference, and then stay for the entire conference and win prizes. A couple of other things. You have a live transcript button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And then it is a disability feature. You may choose to turn that off to enable it or not enable it if it's distracting. I think I have covered everything. And I want to take this time to introduce Dr. Michael McVey. He is from Eastern Michigan University. He has written extensively on instructional technology. He has presented on it. He teaches on it. And for all of those wonderful reasons, that is why Dr. Michael McVey is our keynote today. And at this time, I'm going to turn the session over to you. And thank you, Michael, for joining us today. Round of applause.
Oh, thank you. There we go. All right. Well, let's see. Oh, first of all, nice to see all the Brady bunch here. Good to see you. But let me dive right into it. Give me like 3 seconds to call up my screen as well. So my name is Michael McVey. And if we're ready for me to start, I'll just dive right in. And somebody out there is going to listen to the questions you ask, and Dr. Lanzon will fire them over to me from the chat. I'm not going to read the chat if that's all right with you. Gee, I hope I can actually get this to work. And so I do want to thank, first of all, Henry Ford Community College. I appreciate that very much. Also, Dr. Lanzon, whom I had a chance to chat with, and we hit it off. We're cut from the same cloth, I think. We're the same kind of person. And Dean Schunkweiler, thanks so much for hosting us. I appreciate that greatly. So just a little bit about me. I was a K-12 teacher. I started in, I hesitate to say this, 1980. So some of you are doing the arithmetic with your fingers. I've been in the classroom for a long time, and I don't think there's been more than a month that I haven't gone without teaching. I've also used computers in my classroom since the very beginning. This is my first one I just threw on the screen. It was a pet computer. It was 35 pounds. It was my upper body workout every day as I moved these things around. I'm not going to go on too much more. I am an author. I wrote this book called Meeting the Internet Challenge in 1997. And 3 months later, they decided not to push the book anymore. They wanted to make me the Bill Nye, the science guy of ed tech. It didn't work. But since, I've also been doing other writing as well, including championing technology infusion in teacher preparation, where I try to make the point that every teacher needs to learn how to teach online. We'll talk a bit about that. We'll also talk about ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education. It's huge. And when you become teachers, you're going to hear more and more about that. I'm on their board of directors. I was honored to be elected, and this is the start of my 4th year. I've got 2 more years, and I absolutely love it. This is a fantastic organization. We'll touch on it a bit later. I'm also a school board trustee in Saline area schools. Anyone's from Saline, you know that, hey. And finally, yeah, like, I'm a tech guy. If there's technology involved, I'm in. I have a drone on the floor. I have a 3D printer in the closet. You know, I do all sorts of wild and crazy technology things, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you today. One of my guilty pleasures is this show. I don't know who watches it. Debris. Where scientists find these weird objects from space, and they each have, I'm seeing Shema nodding. and they try to figure out what these strange bits do, and they're building them all together to make a spaceship of some sort. Well, this is kind of like what my life is in the classroom. I have all these great technology pieces, and I'm constantly learning how to put them together so I can build this spaceship that is my classroom. Seriously. So let's talk about classrooms. I'm going to give you an example, a little story that happened one day in a lecture classroom. The standard situation where teachers at the front, professors at the front of the room, excuse me, I'm going to sip my coffee every now and then. I'm also going to learn how to breathe so that I can actually speak a little more slowly. Anyway, you're in a classroom and somebody gets a little hand cramp and they say, you know, I've got an idea. What if I open Google Docs and I just start taking notes instead of handwriting all these silly notes? And then he starts writing the notes and meanwhile says, I've got this idea. I'm going to text my buddy over here and maybe she could do the same thing and open up the document. So I send the document and she opens it up and starts writing notes and then says, hey, you know what? I'm going to bring in other people as well. And we're all going to start adding to this document. So meanwhile, the professor is still talking away at the front of the room and the class are taking notes. And then they're saying, you know what else we can do? We can start like adding references and dig a little deeper, do some research. I don't have to pay so much attention to that guy, blah, blah, blah at the front. When and everyone else is taking the notes for me. Another person says, hey, I'm going to do links. Another person says, hey, I'm going to add a video that I found a reference to that this person was talking about. By the end of the session, you are going to have you can have an incredibly rich document. And this is what I want to talk to you. I want to talk about a number of different frameworks for technology that hold everything together in the classroom. And we're not just talking about university lectures. This works all the way down and all the way up, I should say, to kindergarten and pre-K. So we're going to talk about this SAMR model in a bit. Well, let's go back to the lecture hall for just a second. And you notice that someone is handwriting. So SAMR is really a lot of fun. It's kind of interesting. So the first one is S for substitution. So the first thing that these kids in this class did was they said, well, I'm going to substitute handwriting for Google Docs. Oh, that makes sense. The next level up is augmentation. Now, augmentation is when, you know, this particular substitution tool has all sorts of neat things you can do with it, like spell check and the ability to interact with other people on the side. You can open up a chat window inside Google Docs. And then you get to the next level up where you're starting to reach out. We're calling that modification. Hey, I can modify this document or this task by reaching out and having other people write on the same document at the same time. It's old school for a lot of you folks, but this is just a framework. When you start adding video, you have gone well beyond that initial scribbling on a piece of paper and making notes in a classroom. Well, you can do this at all sorts of levels. And when you get into your teacher's college of choice, you're going to start learning about these different tools that you can use that change the very concept, the basics of everything you've ever done in school as you were growing up. Now, I think this is such a fun activity, and here's what I'd like to do. Those of you who have cell phones right now, you can try this yourself. You can use this QR code, or, and I should really open up the chat window here. I'm going to do that. I'm also going to paste the URL. Here we go. Boom. I'm going to paste the URL in the chat. And what it's going to open up to is just a great big blank document. During my talk, during the next 35 minutes, feel free to add to the document. If I talk about a particular piece of software, you can add to it as well, okay? This is your document, just be polite. But the bottom line in all this stuff that we're going to talk about with technology is that you need to focus on the learning and not on the technology. That's the most important thing. That's my theme for today, okay? Pardon me. I'd like to introduce Dr. Liz Kolb. She's an associate or a clinical professor at the University of Michigan. She's also one of my buddies. She wrote a book a while back called From Toys to Tools about cell phones in the classroom, which her big book now is called Learning First, Technology Second, just like the theme of my little talk here. And we'll talk about her frameworks for talking about this. Is serious stuff, and there's a lot of support materials out there for you, is what I wanted to share by showing that book. Let's also talk about this. Simon Sinek, if you go on TEDx or TED.com, you might find Simon Sinek's talk about the golden circle. This is kind of an important thing. When you get into the classroom and start teaching, you know there's technology out there and you want to use the technology, but the first question Simon Sinek says that you need to answer is what? What is it well, the third question he wants you to think about is, what are you going to teach and what do you need to teach and what are you being told to teach? The next level is the how. Well, how are you going to do it? This is a simple framework, but the most important one, the one that a lot of teachers forget, and I hope you guys remember when you get into the classroom, is the last one, is the why. Always have in mind the target here, the why. Why are you learning this? Why am I asking the kids to do this task? And I have to tell you, I've seen thousands of students come through. The best ones in my classes, when they start using technology, have a solid understanding of why they want the kids to use this technology for what goal. This is the challenge you're going to have going forward in your career. The next challenge you're going to have is dealing with these kids. These kids are creative and energetic and full of music and art and soul and literature and imagination. And you're going to have to figure out ways of reaching them and getting them engaged in the classroom, in the why, the what, the how of your classroom. So I wanted to share this with you. I raised to my students at Eastern Michigan University, and I neglected to say that's where I teach. Pardon me. I said, what do you think about the idea of podcasts in the classroom for young kids? And Mercedes just last week said, well, I think they're going to get really distracted. They're not going to learn from the podcasts. And Janisa says, I don't want them to be lectured at. And, says, well, it's a very good point. But let me flip this around a little bit. What if the kids in your class didn't just listen to podcasts, but they actually created the podcasts? And I got them saying, oh, well, that's an interesting concept. It says, well, what would they possibly do a podcast on? Oh my gosh, what would they possibly not do a podcast on? And I'm going to give you an example. And here's the fun one that I've heard recently, dinosaurs. Let's just talk dinosaurs, because I don't know too many little kids who don't like dinosaurs. Here we go. So by the way, in Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, there's this little school called Willow Creek, I think it is. They started doing a podcast. The first and second graders did podcasts back as far as 10 years ago. And here are some of the topics. Dinosaurs, wild animals, the ocean, space. They did story time. They did all sorts of neat things. But you can do, but wait, there's more. As you get older, you can do podcasts about mathematics, believe it or not, civil rights movement, science. Could you imagine those science teachers, the podcasts you can do about science that the kids could do, adventures in the world, discoveries, challenges. And let's look at all the different things that this simple podcast about dinosaurs could include. So you have the fact zone. Here's some facts about this dinosaur. It takes a minute or two. The kids are reading it off. The kids have researched it, and they're going to talk about the dinosaur. Now, meanwhile, our art teachers, Sumaya, for example, is going to have the kids paint a picture of a dinosaur, and you can have that on a green screen in the back. Now, there's podcasts and there's vodcasts, too, video casts. You could also have great stories about dinosaurs. You could have hallway interviews as you're walking down the hall with a recorder. Hey, kids, what's your favorite dinosaur? You could do musical bumpers where the kids, and I know we have a music person in here today, where I've heard kids give them a bunch of instruments and have them record a little bumper between, this is what the cool kids call those, little audio between each segment in your podcast. And you could also add dinosaur jokes. Oh my gosh, let me think of one. How can you tell if there's a dinosaur in your refrigerator? You can see the footprints in the butter. Come on. Anyway, the things that go on behind the scenes, research, writing that these kids have to do, the planning and organizing, the technology, we'll talk about that in 1 second, and public speaking. I don't know if you do it in your schools, but we have PV LEGS is the acronym we use in Saline area schools to help the kids learn how to become better public speakers. Let's go on. Here's the technology that we use to make this magical thing happen. Anchor.fm, you can call it up. I also use a program called Audacity for recording audio. You can record right from the browser. Hey kids, come on up. I'm gonna have the microphone right here. Here, teachers can actually invest in microphones of their own. I have one up here. I just dropped everything on the desk behind me. You can upload audio files that you've made in another program or even on your cell phone. Walk around the halls with your cell phone and do the voice recorder. Musical bumpers are easy to create and upload. You can drag and drop all these things together, build a little podcast. And if the only people in the world who listen to it are the parents of these great kids, that's fine. Because the real learning, remember, it's the learning, not the technology. The learning are all those other skills that the kids have used to get to that point. Here's another framework for thinking about this. The last framework we had was SAMR or SAMR or SAMR. This is TPAC, and this is a cool one. Using technology, content, and pedagogy. We'll talk about this in a second. Here we go. Another way to look at this is all these different skill sets that you need, the technology, the content, understanding, the learning how to teach. So here's where we go. Your teachers, your subject matter specialists. You want to be a music teacher? You've already got the content. You're working on it. You're developing. It's part of your life. You got into teaching to share your content. You got that. The next is the pedagogy. Well, when you go to your College of Education, you're going to learn a great deal about pedagogy, how to teach, how kids learn, how kids think, how teachers think, all that sort of thing. The next level, and as you're doing this, you're going to start to combine pedagogy and content. Well, how do I teach writing? How do I teach music? You're gaining on that. Your teachers will help you figure, your professors will help you figure that out. The next level up is technology. I've got to tell you, this is a constantly moving target. You recall my upper body workout with the pet computer where I was teaching my special education students how to program in basic language. Fast forward 40 years and things have changed greatly. Fast forward another 10 years and the tools are going to be completely different as well. But the point is that you're aiming for the sweet spot in the middle where you can combine the technology and the pedagogy and the content. And this is a framework that a lot of people, a lot of professors are going to share with you as you get into the classroom. So I'm just going to give you, like, this is just a sneak preview of this whole process. So here's the question. Are your students ready for all this stuff? Well, I'm going to tell you, some of you are saying, I don't know. And others are saying, absolutely. And I'm saying, oh, absolutely. I'm at Harvest Elementary School one day, and a student grabs his ruggedized computer or his iPad, walks it down the hall, and he starts to do something. He said, can I watch, kid? And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. Presses a button, starts reading into his iPad. You can see he's recording his voice, recording the reading he's doing. Presses the button, reviews what he did to make sure that it came out right. Hits another button, it shows up in the teacher's mailbox. This is Seesaw, using a program called Seesaw. Here are just a few other pictures I took in a classroom, modern day classroom, first grade. The kids all have their own iPad. They are reading, they're listening to stories, they're writing, they're using these things all day long. This is just one screen of several 20 or so application screens or applications on the little iPad that each kid in the school got, or each pardon me, transcript device. I know you're trying to keep up. Every child in the classroom has one of these. And here's what goes on. Our world as teachers has absolutely changed. You're not creating new tools anymore. You are now curating amazing tools and resources. This goes for early childhood, goes all the way up to secondary. You're assembling resources in a way that represents the ongoing story of ourselves as learners. You're the curators. And I put the copy of this book down here. Let me just talk about some of the tools for curating these things. Wakelet, what an amazing tool for keeping track of really great websites you find. You can click the button Wakelet, put it in your browser. Every time you find a great website, click, and it shows up, and you can share your Wakelet with your class. Padlet, and we'll talk about Padlet in a few minutes, is another amazing tool. If you've never used it before, drop in, learn a bit about it. You'll see why in a second. Google Keep, I used to use it all the time. I'm still using it. Pinterest. Let me say one thing. I had a student in my class once who said, McVey, and that's how they refer to me, McVey, I go to Pinterest before I go to Google. And I said, nah, you do not. And half the teachers in my classroom said, yeah, when they're looking for materials for their class, Pinterest, teachers have taken over Pinterest. I have to tell you that. Pocket is another great tool you should learn how to use. You put it up in your Chrome browser or your browser, and you find another neat website, click, and it's saved, tucked away for you to use, tucked in your little electronic pocket. There's also Feedly. I look at hundreds and hundreds of blogs every week, but I don't click on each and every one of them. I use Feedly to tell me which one's been updated. And finally, sites.google.com. You're going to create your own websites. You're going to design things for your students to use. You will be the curators, of all of the amazing resources that are out there. Now let's see if I can make this work. Remember we talked about Harvest Elementary School. This is a day, and I don't think the audio is, not to worry, there is no audio. This is just a typical classroom, first grade class. Your teacher, the amazing Ms. Gerbach, is using a smartboard. These are the ruggedized iPads the kids get. She has monitors around the classroom. And the kids, so they don't disturb other people, just plug their headphones in and listen up. There's also this interesting tool here. Every one of the teachers has a lavalier microphone around themselves so that their voice comes out across the classroom. There's no yelling, there's no changing of tone. Every kid in the classroom can hear. Now, I just threw up I found this graphic 2 years ago, and to my horror and shock, some of these companies are already out of business. And that's what I talked about before, the moving target. At the same time, some of these companies have taken off and they're still solid. I'm going to look along the top. Inspiration, I loved Inspiration. It's gone. It's been replaced with tools like Coggle, MindMup, and others. Investigating tools, Quora is still out there. Instapaper is as well. Go down the list. There's so many tools. We're not going to dig into all of them, but what I did want to share with you is that with so many tools out there, this is what I urge my students to do during the course that they're with me. I said, listen, there's so many things out there. I want you to become an expert. I want you to start as a teacher to build your toolbox and to generate the tools. If you're an art teacher, you might use Brush Ninja. If you're a music teacher, you might want to dig into Sibelius or Music Score or some of these other programs. If you're a phys ed teacher, you might want to look at Go Noodle and get really deep into that. But let's talk about this. I'm going to show just a few tools to share. Here's Padlet. And this one student in my class said, well, I'm going to make a Padlet about Padlet, and started to show all these different ways you could use Padlet, a birthday wall, timelines, group work, live question bank, classroom communication, or an exit ticket. There are a lot of things you can do. And this is one that I started doing with my students. Every time they did something neat and exciting regarding technology, I posted it. Everything from videos to 3D printing. And we'll talk about 3D printing in a bit too. And it's so easy for even the little kids. See the big pink button in the bottom right? All they need to do is click on it and start adding their ideas, pictures, anything that's on their screen. Another teacher I had, and she wants to be a first grade teacher. She was doing a lesson on states and capitals. This is how she curated her materials. She's going to be a fantastic teacher someday. She's got all sorts of great materials for the kids. The next thing is Flipgrid, essential tools, Flipgrid. I don't know if you've used it yet or not. hope you do. Flipgrid allows students to really quickly make a video of themselves. You can decide if it's 30 seconds, 2 minutes, even longer now. And I use this for introducing students. We also, sometimes my students say things like, well, I'm going to have my students take some pictures and then upload it to the web, and I'm going to look at them. Your kids don't know how to do that at this point. Some of them do, not the youngest ones. But if you want to do something like you want to share something around your house, you can go to Flipgrid and say, hey, here's my mom's Fitbit. I thought I'd share this with you. She yells at it all the time. And sometimes it tells her when to go to bed, and she doesn't like that. You know, things like that. They can tell their stories. They can tell what's going on in their world. And Flipgrid is absolutely an essential tool and has become even more so since the pandemic happened. Also, if you're looking for help, there's a little book, if you type this into your search engine at some point, you'll find Ditch That Textbook. If you're looking for ways to add technology to your classes, Ditch That Textbook has hundreds and hundreds of ways. And there's the thing, you are never alone anymore when it comes to using technology. There are teachers out there who are using this all the time and are experts and have walked in your shoes. You can relax. It's going to be fantastic not to worry about technology. Kahoot. I had a student left my classroom and said, hey, McVey, you have to tell your kids how to learn how to use Kahoot. If you've never used it before, there's a URL here. You can check the quick read code, the QR code, and play a little sample game of Kahoot. It's 3 questions long. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just a sample if you've never used it before. If you have used it before, talk about engagement of your students in the classroom. You can develop quizzes for free. If you pay extra money, you can do other things, but let's not worry about that right now. I have found this to be incredibly engaging in the classrooms. Let's go to another level up, EdPuzzle. I'm walking out of a conference one day and I saw one of my old students, my former students, and he says, McVey. Again, they all call me McVey. I said, McVey, I'm never going to teach math again the same way. I'm never going to do a lecture. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I'm using EdPuzzle. I said, well, okay, fill me in. What's going on here? He says, I do a little video for my kids at the beginning of the class, and I put it up on YouTube or Vimeo, okay? And then I just post the thing, and when I post it, I can add questions throughout to check for understanding. And I said, you mean a formative assessment? He says, yeah, exactly. By the time the kids get to my class, we could just work into the practice that we're doing. I don't have to teach the lesson anymore. The lesson has already been taught and it's out there for the kids to access anytime. And I said, well, what prompted you to do this? And he says, I teach in downtown Detroit. The busing is like crazy. Sometimes the bus takes hours, it's really, really late. And the kids were dribbling into my classroom, my first class of the day, and I'd have to repeat the same lesson over and over again. But if they have this and they can look at it at home the day before, and I said, say no more, you had me at that. If you don't want to use EdPuzzle, there's also a tool called Play Pause It, which is out there. So many tools that do the same thing. Also, students today, of course, since the pandemic happened, we're becoming really quite good at figuring out virtual classrooms. I don't care which one you use or learn to use, because you can master, this is the icon, by the way, for Google Classroom. You could master Google Classroom and then find out you're getting hired to teach in a school that uses Moodle. And rather than go crazy about that, just remember that you're learning, you know all about the learning first, the technology second. Brightspace by Desire to Learn, D2L. Canvas is out there, Blackboard is out there, Schoology is also available. Doesn't matter which tool you're trained on, as long as you understand the basic function of what it is you're trying to do. If you understand that why, and then you can understand the what and the how just falls into place later. Let's talk Google Apps for a second. They are ubiquitous. That's your $50 word for the day. They are everywhere. And this is a much better title, Google Apps. take a look around. There are so many apps. I looked through this list of Google apps the other day, and I recognized that I've used almost all of them. And then I started getting farther and deeper down the list, and I went, yikes, I don't know that. Anyway, yeah, it's like, it's too many. So there are some core Google apps you need to know. And I'm not really won over by the first layer of logos. Gmail, Calendar, Google Drive, Hangouts, this is important. But really what's more important are these tools at the bottom. We'll talk about those in just a second. It is possible for you as teachers during the next year or two to earn your level 1 certified educator certificate for understanding how to use these tools. And I'm going to tell you why. I have been involved with hiring teachers, and I don't want to scare anybody, but some teachers go in and they say, I think I know a little bit about technology. They sit down in their job interview, and the interviewer says, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to use technology in the classroom? Because we just spent $22 million giving every teacher computers and putting screens up in the classroom and all these tools. How are you going to use the tools? But if they see that you're a level 1 Google certified educator, and it doesn't take a great deal to get to that point, they are going to be so impressed with you. Because let's just ask a few simple questions. Google Docs. Do you know how to make a Google Doc? Do you know how to share a Google Doc? Do you know how to add hyperlinks and elements inside it? How about Google Sheets? And by the way, I say Google, if you master this in Microsoft tools as well, you will also make me very, very happy as an employer. Do you know how to do graphs and charts in Google Sheets? Google Slides, do you know how to make a nice, smooth transition? Do you know how to turn a Google slideshow into a presentation, into a quiz? Do you know how to use Google Sites to make little websites for your class? Easy to do, not hard at all. Finally, do you know how to use Google Forms? Google Forms for me has been a wonderful tool, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. By the way, you can get level 1 certification, level 2. If you do enough of this stuff, you can become a Google trainer. School districts will fall over themselves with you. After, let's say a year or so into being a teacher, you should probably apply to be a Google certified trainer. I've got that as well. The upper level is Google certified innovator. I didn't make the cut the first time, but I may give it another crack later. So there are all these great tools that are out there, and my students have been trying to do it. Here's Leah. She just got her certificate the other day, and I said, could you send me a selfie? I got to tell you, these people are smiling from ear to ear when they get their certificate. It took 2 hours of an online test. And 30 minutes later, she found out she passed and sent me this great selfie. Let's talk about Google Forms for just a second. Here's what teachers are doing. You open up Google Drive, you click the button that says new. It opens up, you say, well, I'm going to click the button that says Google Forms. You open up Google Forms and you have a blank. It's a simple matter of filling out the elements. Put in a title, put in the next part, and boom, you have an overview of the field trip you're going to take to the Detroit Zoo, for example. And I'm sharing this because this is actually created by one of my students, Ms. Worster. She has, I can tell you a funny story. My students created these great permission forms, and almost every single one of them neglected to ask what the name of the child was who was coming in. So they got all these permission forms came in, and we didn't know whose child was being allowed to come on the field trip. So we had to go back to the drawing board and reteach the lesson. You can add videos, images, links, all sorts of other neat things. I asked my students, how long did this take? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, not hard at all. So what looks like incredible professional things that you can put out for the parents, what we call public facing, parent facing, is not difficult to do at all these days. Let's talk about reaching parents. I use Remind. That way I don't need to know my students' cell phone numbers. They all just basically text a number from their cell phone to a place, and I can send one message to all of my students very quickly. Seesaw, if you want to be an elementary teacher, you should get yourself a little Seesaw account and start learning how Seesaw works. Class Tag is also a big one. Let's talk about Class Dojo if you want to reach out to parents. People aren't picking up the phone anymore these days or sending notes home with the kids. they use things like Class Dojo. And some of you are familiar with this. The little monsters in Class Dojo are wonderful. If a student does something that's, oh, you got in a little bit of trouble, you can click a button. I suppose that's acceptable. And 3 strikes and you're out. No, it doesn't work like that anymore. What we also use Class Dojo for is if a student does something great in the class, you can click a couple of buttons very, very quickly. I've been in classes where the teacher has this available all the time. Kid reads a story, he's the first one to volunteer. Teacher just flips it over, so I'm giving you a point, ding, and then at the end of the week or even at the end of the day, you can send little messages to the parents. Twitter, I'm not going to talk a lot about Twitter. Twitter is an essential tool these days for professional development for teachers. I'm a school board trustee. I follow all 250 teachers in my district who have Twitter accounts. So I get a sense of what's going on in their classes. And a lot of neat stuff is going on. Twitter keeps me in touch. I glance in, I take a look every day to say, oh, that's interesting, that's interesting. Teachers go to professional.
Michael, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some dialogue going in the chat feature right now.
Yep.
And I'm going to interject really fast if I can. The question is, how does this technology impact social interactions among peers? And I think that's a lot of teachers' concern, is that it takes away from the social development of our students.
Well, it depends on how it's being used in the classroom entirely. In fact, it depends on what particular tool the students are talking about. This tool, for example, for Twitter, is something that the teachers will generate updates for the parents. They might have 30 subscribers. If you're talking about, let's go back to that classroom that we saw earlier, the social emotional, a lot of teachers have some very strict restrictions on the amount of screen time the students have. We're going to talk about screen time in just a bit. But that the social emotional learning and the interaction that goes on has been trickier to do these days in the classroom, but the technology itself is not getting it. I don't want to make a general statement. I was going to say it doesn't get in the way. Obviously, anything can get in the way. Sitting quietly in rows with your hands on your fingers, like I had to do in 2nd grade, can get in the way of social emotional learning. A good teacher will keep that always in mind. Will use the technology if the students aren't in their class. They'll use the technology to reach out and get feedback from the kids and check in regularly and get them together in groups, get them together to share, get them together to develop the social aspect of it, to check in on their emotional well-being as often as possible, and to develop as many connections with the children as possible. And this is why I'm spending a little bit of time talking about focusing on reaching out to the parents. I may not be able to give a very good answer here, but maybe we can talk about it at 11:45 too. So I just want to share a couple.
I think it was a great answer, Michael.
Oh, isn't that sweet? Thank you. Let's dig into a whole other thing, and I'll come to a conclusion. And I've got so many more things to talk about. You know, I could talk about this all day. Here's Poppy the elephant. Poppy was born, started a conversation in a classroom, and the teacher thought, hey, you know what? I want all my kids to learn about elephants. And yeah, she's got all these elephant books in the classroom. But you know what really turned the corner for the class was this way of thinking about problems, thinking about designing things. It's called design thinking. There are 5 simple steps. And so we had an activity in the class. The question that came up was, could we keep an elephant in our schoolyard? It may sound like a silly question. Replace the word elephant with ostrich if you want. Could we keep an ostrich or an elephant in our schoolyard? Well, let's talk about that. Let's define the problem. What does an elephant need, kids, to keep healthy and happy? What do we need to keep Poppy healthy and happy? The next is, and then start ideating. We start to come up with ideas. Let's brainstorm. Let's sketch it out. Do we need to gate? How do we get the food? Where do we put the food? How does it, what do we need to do? Next level up is build a prototype, maybe chart it out, map it out, build a model. How could we keep this ostrich or this elephant in our school? Finally, let's test it out. Let's brainstorm. Let's maybe check with somebody from a zoo, check with a veterinarian. And then if it doesn't work out, go back to the beginning and ideate all over again. Test, retest, develop things. Sometimes what you end up with is, hey, I don't think we can keep an elephant in the classroom, but how about a guinea pig? So the kids say, this is more reasonable, class. Let's talk about what we need to keep our guinea pigs healthy and happy. What do they need? And before you know it, they've got these skills. They've learned how to do the whole ideation, prototyping, testing, defining the real problem. Thinking in terms of this idea, this mental framework can be extraordinarily helpful. So we talked about SAMR, we talked about TPAC, we talk about design thinking. These are three things that if you want to teach with technological know-how, these are frameworks that are going to help you out. Let's talk really briefly about emerging tools. Also, keep your head open for emerging tools. Don't poo-poo the idea that a 3D printer isn't for you or for your kids, because a 3D printer can be an absolutely wonderful thing and really not that expensive too. In fact, almost every school that I've been in now has a 3D printer, and kids are using these things. And what's so important about it? Well, you can use these tools to solve problems. For example, here's the simplest one I've got. I created a little cable holder for my desk. I just sort of, I wonder if I could do this, and built it, designed it using a simple program called Tinkercad. I've also, let me just share this. Here's a 3D model of my head. Somebody did this once. Now, it might look a little silly that I have this, and why on earth do you have this, McVey? Well, here's the story. I should tell you. They scanned my head at the orthotics and prosthetics group. And I walked in there one day and someone said, oh my gosh, you're the guy. And I said, what do you mean I'm the guy? He says, come with me into this room. I walk into this room and they've got like 25 models of my head. And they said, we just used your head as an example of all the different media. Here's the yellow one right there. And I said, well, what are you going to do with those when you're done? He said, I just throw them out. And I said, oh, no, you're not. So I have hundreds of these little models floating around my house right now. Little kids can design toys. Older kids can design little robot tools. Oh, I got one. Somebody built this in my class just the other day as a little simple robot. The design and the thinking that goes on behind them are real simple. They can solve problems in the classroom. Whoops. Oops. Hang on a second. Somebody's got a superpower thing up. They can design problems in the classroom, solve problems in the school, solve problems in the community, and solve problems nationwide. Depending on the age of the kid, everyone's got an opinion, it seems these days, and everyone has solutions. And using design thinking can help you organize the thinking so it doesn't seem like some random chaotic activity going on in the class. We don't have much time to talk about ISTE, but I do want to remind you all, if you're interested in technology, MCCALL, M-A-C-U-L, the Michigan Association of Computer Users and Learning.org, is Michigan's teacher base. You can register for this for free. MCCALL is your organization for teachers. And like I said, the registration is free now. As you develop your professional learning network, MCCALL is going to be an extraordinarily important part of that. I did want to also remind you that when you get through your teacher training, you are actually going to know more than some of the teachers in the classroom that you are teaching in. And as a consequence, you will become a school leader, believe it or not. We're going to talk about citizenship at some point. There are all these neat things that happen with citizenship, but mostly it's more about developing students' voice in the world. This is one of the other standards. Everything from staying safe to respecting copyright and understanding your digital footprint. And I got to tell you, the digital footprint part is extremely important for future teachers. Your social media presence is extraordinarily important and will be going forward. We'll talk about analysts later and tools and technologies. Most important point is that Scantron tests and bubble-in tests someday may be a thing of the past. But for now, right now, they're here. But as you become teachers in the world, you're going to start looking for technologies that assess where students are that are engaging and fun and interactive and authentic. And the kids aren't going to be, not going to have the love of learning beaten out of them by schooling. So, but we won't talk about cognitive load. We'll save it for that at this point. So I've stopped sharing my screen. There we go. And I don't know if there's any time for any questions. And so I'm almost, if anyone has been playing around inside that blank document that I shared at the beginning, that's great. If not, I don't know what I'm going to see when I take a look at it. It's either going to be a giant blank page or full of all sorts of fun insights. So any questions for you? I hope I've accomplished what you wanted me to do, Dr. Lanzon.
You have. Thank you so much. And actually, I'm learning a whole lot. I was actually taking pictures with my phone of your screen. So I was like, I don't know what that is. I have to look that up. I don't know what that is. I have to look that up. So I'm very excited to see the new technology and like literally like a grid that I can go, okay, this is what that technology does. This is what that technology does. And I think as teachers, we get frustrated because there's so much out there, but we don't know how to put it together. And what I've learned about technology is that it's not that teachers don't want to use it. It's oftentimes we don't know what to use and we don't know how to use. And then the other part is I think teachers aren't given enough time to learn, to play around, to master the technology.
Right. That's why I urge my students, future teachers, teacher candidates, to develop a toolbox where they're really comfortable with a particular tool and they use it and use it and use it so that they become really quite good at it. And yeah, there are a lot of great tools that are grade level oriented. So I won't talk anymore because I know we have like it's almost like there's a whole conference going on this morning.
I know, crazy, right?
Right. Well, I'm expecting Matthew to start writing musical bumpers for his class or for my future class. If I get an MP3 file in the mail one day, Matthew, I know it's going to be from you, and I'm looking forward to getting that audio. All right.
So we're now going to take a quick 5-minute break. So please come back at 10 o'clock. And at 10 o'clock, you're going to choose your first session, your first 30-minute session, and you'll choose it by color. The rooms are down at the bottom, and then you'll click on the room that you want to attend. And I'll see you guys back in 5 minutes.
Okay, I have a real quick question. A sign-in sheet, do we have a sign-in sheet?
I believe that if your name is correct on here, some of you don't have your name per se. It'll say like Rawa's iPhone. I don't know Rawa's last name or Mona's or Curtis or Jenny's. So what you want to do is change your name on the screen so that I have your correct name. It is 10:04. We are going to go to those breakout rooms right now. Yeah. Here are your breakout rooms. You get to choose between the yellow, the blue, or the green. Yellow is Mrs. Laura Rowe, shifting gears in pre-K and incorporating tech along the way. The blue is Miss Baydoun, Arts and Crafts and Technology 2. The green room is Mr. Stephen Brown, and hands-on science experiments over Zoom, easy as 1, 2, 3. Now, on your mark, get set, go. Hit that room.
I am here. I am actually in my classroom, being flexible, as aren't we all, hence we're here. I have the opportunity, I'm pretty excited to be honored to introduce this next person. She is amazing, very positive. It makes me want to be a better person, and she truly believes in me. I'm not going to cry, but I wouldn't be where I am today without her help and guidance. Dr. Lanzon is amazing, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. So if she didn't put this whole thing together, I wouldn't be meeting you guys today and spending this time with you. So I am pleased to announce that she is the one that is going to be talking to you. So here is Dr. Lanzon.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to be sharing my screen. So let me know if you can see my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, we see it.
All right, fantastic. So some of you might know, some of you don't know, this is my last semester at Henry Ford College. I started my career out at Henry Ford in 1984, and I transferred from Henry Ford to Eastern. I became a middle school and high school teacher in Ypsilanti, Willow Run in particular. Went to graduate school at Florida State, became an administrator for 4 years, took the job at Henry Ford, was interviewed by people who taught me, and they hired me. So it's been an amazing career, but this is my last one, and it's ending on an amazing note because I get to present in an area that I think is most important, and that's universal design for learning. And this approach incorporates technology, and it was created based on the use of technology to increase student engagement and understanding. So on that, I'm going to begin the presentation. So the themes for this session are going to be a universal design for learning overview, a discussion of why teachers should use UDL, how we develop expert learners, the 3 principles of universal design for learning, the universal design for learning instructional method examples. I have tons of them in this presentation. I'm not going to go over all of them because literally I think I put 100 in here. And then a summary of universal design for learning. If you've taken my special education class, or if you've taken me for educational psychology, or you've taken me for introduction to education, UDL is literally discussed in every one of your foundations courses, your educational foundation courses, whether you take them at the community college or you take them at the university. That's how important this approach to learning is. So, how did UDL get started? Well, the beginnings of UDL come from a group. They're called the Center for Applied Science Technology, and they created the UDL principles in 1984. This was a nonprofit organization that said, you know what, we really need to address students with learning disabilities, and we think technology, this new emerging technology, is going to do it. And the research shows students with learning disabilities who have the right technology available and are taught how to use it, effectively, they do increase in achievement. So they were right. Their research maintains something that if you've taken me for a class, I maintain, and that teaching should be flexible. The teaching methods you use should be flexible. Your approach to learning should not just be technology. Your approach to learning should not only be hands-on approach. An integrative, well thought out, predetermined approach is the best approach based on the objectives that you're teaching to. And this group, they created the 3 neuroscience-based principles you'll be learning about today. So why is it important for teachers to use UDL? Why does it matter? Well, it's very important because classrooms are filled with students, and they're filled with students who are not all alike. Even in a classroom where you can have the exact same demographics, every student in your classroom may be the same race, the same ethnicity, the same religion, the same social background. You will have a diverse population, even within that grouping. So it's so important that we know that students have different needs. They come from different educational backgrounds. They have differences in their attention span and what they're interested in learning about. They have different language abilities. We have English language learners, and they have different cultural backgrounds. So because of this beautiful palette that we have from diversity, UDL addresses it. UDL says, you know what, if you try our approaches, your students are going to learn a lot more. So the goal is to develop expert learners. But how do we do that? Teachers say all the time, we want kids who can learn. But our job as teachers is to teach kids how to learn. And that's what UDL says. UDL says we have a job, we have a responsibility to create expert learners. But first off, we have to figure out what's an expert learner. So the first thing we want to talk about is that expert learners are resourceful. They're knowledgeable. An expert learner will say, you know what I learned in math class applies to what I learned in science class. What I learned in educational psychology applies to what I'm learning in special education. So these are learners who can transfer knowledge. We know that they take prior information from home and they incorporate into what they're learning in class or what they learned from reading a book outside of class. They'll assimilate new information. They will actively look for resources. So if you've taken my classes online, you see that each of the sections has a list of resources, extra information. Well, what we know about expert learners is expert learners will click on it, they'll watch the video, they'll click on it, they'll read the article, they'll click on it, they'll watch the interview because they want to know more. That's what expert learners do. And that's what we want our children to do too. They'll transfer what they know from new information and they'll make it functional and make it make sense to themselves. We know that expert learners are strategic, that they're goal-oriented, that they'll put together a plan for learning. They'll make a schedule. They say they'll put it together like Monday after school. I eat my snack when I get home from school. My mom says I can watch 30 minutes of cartoons and then I do homework from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So they literally will put themselves on a plan. That's what an expert learner does. So what we have to teach kids is how do you structure your time? How do you put yourself on a plan? And as teachers, we can teach them how to create those plans. And that increases their cognitive structures, that whole planning area and the executive function of the brain, that's up in here. It increases all these connections and it makes them better learners, which then in turn increases their achievement. We also want to have expert learners be mastery learners. So when we talk about mastery learners, a mastery learner will do this. And I'm going to give 2 examples of students. One who is performance-based, and this research comes from Carol Dweck. So we have one child who's performance-based. We have another student who is mastery-based. The performance-based child, when they get their work back, they get their assignment back, they want to know, how did I do compared to my peers? That's what a performance-based learner will do. A mastery-based learner, an expert learner will do this. They will say, how can I improve myself and what I learned on this assignment? So if I got essay question 1, I got 8 out of 10, essay question 2, I got 10 out of 10. I'm going to ask the teacher, what could I have done better to get a 10 out of 10 on my first essay question? So they're more about that interpersonal, that intra-personal learning. It is about how do I make myself a better learner? And what we want to do is teach children to value that mastery perspective. Are there any questions so far? Feel free to ask me as we go along. I'm really good at stopping and explaining things. So they came up with, so the UDL consists of 3 different principles. The first principle is that as teachers, we need to provide our learners with multiple means of representation. So in some of the sessions today, I saw a lot of wonderful things. So I saw in art class, not only were the students engaging with the canvas because they have to, that's the learning management system, but they were also creating art at home out of crayons and paper and shading and drawing. So one of the things I want to leave this conference with and give to you is the understanding is that it's that combined approach that works best. There's not an either or. You use the teaching methods that work for the goal you want to meet. And oftentimes it's a combination that works best. So one of the things we know is that learners perceive information differently. I am very much, if I'm in a class, I see somebody, I think, Karen, you're taking notes? Karen is me. If I'm in a session, let me tell you something, I am taking notes. I already took pictures of people's slides. I'm like, I'm going to write this down. I'm going to look it up. Some of us, that's our preferred means of representation. We learn best that way. Others are not like that way. Sometimes we have students who may have sensory disabilities or language differences, And they might need to have more of a hands-on approach. They might need to see it, to feel it, to touch it. And then we also have other learners that they can learn from multiple ways. But as teachers, when we give multiple representations, whether the child is a preschool child or a high school senior, it's the multiple means of representation that engages our students the most. It's not just the telling them what to do. That's not the most effective way. It's saying, hey, you can read this, you can write about it, you can draw a picture about it, you can work with a partner, you can work in a group, you can access a website online, you can use this game, you can use Kahoot, multiple means of representation. That's the goal. The second principle that we're going to talk about here is when we really call it the how of learning. So what we want to do here is we want learners to think about the learning environment and express what they know. We want to increase their action and their expression. We want to increase that movement. I sat in sessions today, I bopped between all of you. Activity, it's action. It's action. It doesn't matter, preschool, middle school, high school, it's action, it's movement. The research on the brain is so clear that when children move, when they have an action attached to a learning objective, they retain the information and they learn more. That's how important movement is. Stop and think about yourselves how you learn. How many of you take notes? How many of you get up and walk around while you're studying? How many of you put your earpods on and you listen and you study as you have the book reading to you? And we have so many options now as to how we can learn best. Some students, I'm one of them, I love to read. That's not everybody. Some people, I have a friend, she's like, oh, I just finished a book. And I'm like, what did you finish? And then everything she finishes is auditory. All of her books are auditory books. My books are all hard copy. I touch them, I smell them. I'm that gal. But she's not. She's like, I got my earpods on and I listen, while I'm doing my exercising, and she learns that way. Another action and expression is teaching our kids to put together a strategy of learning, teaching them that practice makes perfect. I just had a student, I don't know, this week, last week, can't really remember. She called me, she might be in my session, and she's like, oh, I'm doing terrible in math. And I'm like, it's not that you can't do math, it's that you didn't practice math enough. And that's that thing is like, practicing is so important. By the time a teacher is an expert teacher, they have engaged in the field of education 10,000 hours. They've practiced some form of their specialty for 10,000 hours. Right now, you've spent 3 hours. This is 3 hours that you've put toward becoming an expert. And you did it by engaging in an online conference. Once again, just a reminder, there's not one perfect way of addressing action and expression, multiple ways. Make them match your objective, okay? The third one is multiple means of engagement. So this is the why to the learning. Why do we do as teachers what we do? Well, we want to engage learners. If they're engaged, they're going to be more interested, they're going to learn more, and therefore the achievement's going to be better, their skill level is going to be higher. So some learners love spontaneity. They're like, whoa, great. We're just doing something fun today. Other learners are like, Dr. Lanzon, you're off your script and that wasn't on the agenda for today. That's not on the syllabus. Some students love it, some students don't. So you want to always think about, am I bringing a balance to my classroom? We want to think about affect. And in educational psychology, you learn a lot about affect, and affect pertains to our emotional engagement with learning. And I heard in all the sessions today, choice. Choice is affect. So when I taught middle school, they all did a book report. Everybody did a book report. That's what you do in middle school, lots of book reports. You do a lot of reading, a lot of writing, especially when you're a language arts teacher. However, they chose the novels. They had the same format, the same expectations, but not the same material. So we want that element of choice. We want our students to write letters to the editor, write a letter to their senator. We want them to engage in activities that emotionally stimulate them. So now we're on to the examples, and there's 5 million of them. The more I looked, the more I found. So I finally just quit looking. So I put the ones up here I think that are pretty easy to do, and it's a great start. My first year teaching, if you take me on campus, I would tell the story. When I first started teaching middle school, I had the literature anthology book. It had all of the questions labeled, the different Bloom's taxonomy label attached to the questions. I carried that textbook everywhere I went. That was my, I don't know, it was my blanket. And I literally did every activity for every chapter in that anthology. That's what we do when we first start teaching. We do what is safe. And then what we do is we learn how to become a better teacher. We add more and more techniques, and we rely less and less on canned material, and we start creating our own material. And these are the instructional methods that matter most, the ones that you create. And oftentimes they're the ones most engaging for your students. So what are some ideas? Always, I don't care if you're teaching preschool or if you're teaching high school seniors, you should have a course outline. You should know what you're doing month by month. If you take me on campus, I will tell you, before you walk into that classroom the first day, you should have spent the month of August getting ready for the month of September. If you take that time out, prepping and preparing for the year, before you step foot into that building, if the kids' names are on their desk, the bulletin boards are up, your online classroom is set up, your handouts are ready to go, your emails to the parents are set up, your school year is going to be so much easier because you won't be running around like a chicken with their head cut off. And even at Henry Ford, my courses are up well before the semester starts. And they're changed. And I heard that in each session today too, that you change your material as you go along. So that organization is top. Providing hyperlinks, information for parents, all of that's important. Sharing a list of keywords, definitions that they're going to be learning about that week. Having students post their lecture notes. Then you can go in and see what they understood and what they didn't understand. And then as a teacher, if you need to wear the assisted learning devices, listening devices, whatever helps those children who have disabilities learn best. I do have a funny story. I had a student in my class, she had a cochlear implant, which she was hearing impaired, and I wore the transmitter around my neck. She failed to tell me to turn it off when she went to the bathroom. And consequently, I heard the whole bathroom experience. And then when she came out, I said, you forgot to tell me to mute the transmitter when you, in fact, I didn't even know how to mute the transmitter at that time. So we live and learn. You know, we're not perfect. It's not meant to be perfect. That's one of the beautiful things about teaching, is every single day is a new experience. So what are some other examples? PowerPoint, Prezi, Google Slides. You've heard this all day today. Make use of those presentation software that you have. I mean, they're there. Make use of them. Use your lesson plan, your lesson objectives, your class outline. Pop it in there. Post it on your learning management system. Provide cues when you're talking to the kids. use visuals, graphs, maps, cartoons, video, multimedia, illustrating concepts. Make sure that outline is available for the kids each class session. I don't know, like, if any of you have ever had professors or teachers when you were in school, but you would come in and they would pull out a handout, and the handout was like a crossword puzzle, and you knew that that was a brain dead day and you weren't engaged. Don't be that teacher. Plan ahead. So what are some other? Record your lectures, share your videos. If you take my classes online, I always have videos up. I always have video assignments. I love videos. I love YouTube. I think it's the greatest thing out there. Create online discussions. In my case, I use discussion board. Assess in different ways. That's another thing I want to talk about with Universal Design for Learning is they push that you use multiple ways to assess student learning. You do it formatively, you do it summatively. And when you're assessing, you want to have alternate means of assessment, which means we don't assess just one way. So you might assess via project, papers. It might be you do have a standardized kind of test, but the idea here is that you use multiple assessment measures. What that does is it engages student learning. I might not like taking the standardized kind of multiple choice test, but I loved that project. So when I did the project, I got more engaged with the material, which then increases the likelihood I'm going to do well on the multiple choice test. Use rubrics, get feedback, use Kahoot, electronic portfolios, wikis, blogs, have students create their own websites, their own blogs, and ask yourself these 3 questions. Are my instructional strategies inclusive? Can the child with the learning disability master the assignment? Have I made my room barrier free for the student with the physical disability? Are my instructional methods addressing different learning styles and different types of learners? And am I providing my students with a variety of instructional methods? And once again, I have a whole bunch more journals, feedback, multimedia projects for your students, asking students to work in pairs. So what do we know about UDL? And I'm not really sure how I'm doing for time. How am I doing for time? Does anyone know?
Yeah, you have 5 minutes.
Great. So what do we know about UDL? First off, teachers need to create their unit plans, which my EdPsych students are doing right now, and lesson plans with intentionality, considering the diverse students that they're teaching. The more varied the teaching methods that address diverse population of students, the greater the academic gains. Technology, when used with intention, enhances the learning experience and it increases our students' motivation to learn. And UDL strategies, they include traditional teaching strategies. It doesn't throw out direct teaching. What it does is it says, you know what, if this lesson needs you to have a direct instruction, incorporate technology to make it a better one. Technology is all about enhancing the learning experience. And as teachers, we want to choose technology that makes sense for what we're trying to accomplish with our students. And then I have some amazing quotes up here. Oops, sorry. The first one is a lot of different flowers make a bouquet. Isn't it amazing that we're all made in God's image and yet there's so much diversity among his people? I can see myself in all things and all people around me. Diversity is the one true thing we all have in common. Celebrate it every day. And if you need any further information, I can be reached at planzon@hfcc.edu. I want to thank all of you so much for attending the seminar this fine Friday morning. I know it took a lot to sit down and hang out for 3 hours on Zoom, but I do appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and transition into the Q&A session. And during this time, you can ask any of the presenters any questions that you would like to.
Before we do that, I would just like to encourage everyone to, Patricia, can you stop sharing?
Yeah.
I'd encourage you to turn your cameras on for a moment, and everybody give Patricia Lanzon some love here. Applause, hands up, you know, hearts, whatever you want. Keeping in mind that Dr. Lanzon is leaving us after this. This is her final conference. So I don't want people to get too teary-eyed at the end, but just want to point out the great work that she's done. We're going to take questions. You can either put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand, or frankly, you can just, you know, wave at the camera and we'll acknowledge you. So who would like to start the Q&A? You may ask questions of anyone, either Dr. McVey, Dr. Lanzon, or any of the people who ran the breakout rooms. Well, I'll start then. Patricia, I wonder about your presentation that you just completed. Do you believe it's harder now for teachers to do the things that you were suggesting with UDL in the online environment, or do you think that's really just a matter of adapting to the technology?
Well, UDL was created with technology in mind. So the goal of UDL was always to use technology to increase student achievement. The beginnings of it was, they were based on children with learning disabilities. But now what we have seen is that all children can gain from it. I think, Rhonda, what I've seen that's hard is oftentimes in schools of education, and this is no affront to my colleagues here from schools of education at the university level, but oftentimes there's a bandwagon that gets pushed.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll throw out traditional techniques such as rote memorization. We know in the early years is needed. If you want children to learn math, they have to know those math facts.
Right.
If you want them to be able to engage in the higher level math facts have to be memorized so that they're not looking at strings of problems trying to figure out 3 times 6.
Right.
So we do know this. What I think is problematic is when we have schools of education that will hop on a bandwagon like whole language approach. And now we had 2 generations of students who can't spell, because we threw out some of the basics with phonics.
Mm-hmm.
So I think more it's that combination and recognizing that it's not technology or traditional, it's both, that it's integrated, and that we need to be intentional. And I love all the technology presented today, because so many new teachers here can look and say, I can use this for this assignment. I could use this type of technology for that assignment. I think that's what's the most important, is being able to pick and choose that meets your teaching objective. I have a question for Samaya.
Go for it.
So Samaya, we've talked a little bit, and so can you kind of like in a minute or two describe what your day is like now physically?
Oh, so we are back 5 days a week. We're back face to face. So I teach my classes. And then at the very end of the day, I have about like maybe 2, maybe 1 VA classes. So I teach 32 classes in a week. And then so I have my VA and I have my in-person. And because of COVID, I cannot use my classroom. So I have to use my cart. And so I definitely use technology. I have to make little videos to help with instruction while I'm passing out supplies as well. And I have to record my lessons for my VA classes. So that way, when I meet with them, they can watch what I was trying, what the lesson activity, and then we can meet and connect and they can ask questions. So it's very exhausting. And I definitely do need technology with teaching art. Before, I didn't really think I would need technology except for the smart board to kind of put visuals, and my hover cam. So, but yeah, now I'm like a YouTuber.
Me too.
I don't know if it's really a question, but it's more of a comment. I think, you know, if you conceptually grasp how you learn things, you take different approaches. We've always had things that we have difficulty with, that we couldn't learn one way, then we looked at it from a different perspective, or somebody showed us something a different way, and then we were able to comprehend it. And then the other comment would be, it's in our best interest as attempting to teach, whether they be children or adults, using tools and that they are comfortable with. And more as we see these children and we see these generations, woe be unto us if we can't speak to them using the tools that they use every day. It's going to be the most effective way to reach many, many people moving forward.
I think you're right. Definitely, Mark. And I like that the self-reflective piece that you brought out, and that's a piece that teachers, we want teachers to engage in, and why we give you guys so many journal activities is that self-reflection. And then also knowing what our own teaching biases are. Because oftentimes teachers will teach the way they were taught. Because it worked for me, but that doesn't mean it's working for the other 30.
Well, I'd be interested in hearing from Dr. McVey, who is probably one of our most senior teachers here, about how have you maintained your passion for teaching over all this time and through this era in which teachers are not always as valued as we know they should be, and there's been sort of a devaluation overall of the profession, and especially this past year, people expecting teachers to teach in multiple modalities and not expect any additional compensation or help, and especially in school districts that are suffering. What advice or reflections might you have for people on maintaining that level of passion through times like this?
First of all, it's because of these kids back here that I still maintain my interest in teaching. I mean, it's all about the excitement and thrill of learning new things. And you know what 41 years in, and every time I'm in a class and one of my students says, "Oh, that just squirts dopamine right into my brain." Oh yeah, that's why I'm here. But I don't know, maybe it's a personality thing. Maybe I'm just a slow learner, but I'm still trying to learn how to become a better teacher every year, right? And it is exciting. It's something that it's part of what's in your heart. I wanted to talk about, I'm a Canadian, so I learned how to use this phrase. I think I used it properly. I want to talk to all of y'all to get that.
That's right, you got it.
Thank you. When I first started teaching in 19 whatever it was, I went
1900.
Yeah. But back in the late 1900s, I was told, "Why do you want to be an English teacher?" And I said, "Well, they said there are no jobs. There are no jobs out there." And at that time in Ontario, there were no jobs. So everybody in the class were basically, we knew we needed to be teachers. So none of you guys want to be teachers. I think you need to be teachers. So with this pandemic and the shift, the pivot to online and back to face and then hybrid, if that doesn't scare you away, you're already teachers in your heart. The next step is to just learn the skills and develop and practice. I mean, I bet Sumaya and looking at the other names and Steve and others, you probably occasionally you pulled out great lessons and it was like the most wonderful day in your life. And then other days you're thinking, what the heck am I doing this for? Yeah, the paint spills, the computer keyboard doesn't work, your filter system doesn't, whatever you're doing with the kids. I've had horrible days too, but you know what? You wake up the next day and you get in there and it's a challenge, but it's part of what breathes life into what you've chosen for a profession. So I'm so excited about every one of you who's stepping up to want to be a teacher at this time. I mean, that's bravery too, right? So you can give yourself a pat on the back. You got your cameras off, so you can do it. I won't say, there you go. Shit. Anyway, I hope that answered your question, Rhonda. You always ask the hard questions, or Patricia does, or whoever asked it.
Yeah, it's part of my job, asking hard questions.
I knew Rhonda DeLong when she was at Eastern Michigan University, so I was delighted to run into her again. So, and
Thank
Patricia,
you.
full to
Great
meet
to see you too.
Patricia. And I hope to see some of you guys at Eastern someday. Will that happen? Might that happen?
I imagine that will happen.
Kelsey, I could see she almost put her hand up for a second there, but that's all right. And you know,
I
Question
applied
for
2
Katie.
days ago. Oh, I
ahead.
applied there 2 days ago.
well, good. Well, okay. Yay.
Yeah, that's great.
For any of you, for all of you, if you ever have a question, like if I can answer, just send me an email, really seriously, and say, hey, I was one of the people in the Henry Ford thing. I've got a question. That's all right. I live in emails. I answer questions all the time, and I'm happy to help. Let me change my background to something more presentable.
You've just made a dangerous offer to let people reach out to you at any time. But I hope that other folks here recognize the access that you have in this moment to a lot of expertise. So I want to encourage you to, we still have about 5 minutes left in our designated Q&A period. It doesn't matter what your question is, just ask.
I have a question for Katie.
Go ahead, Dr. Lanzon.
Oh, no, you go first. It's fine.
I
Shema,
have a question. I just wanted to thank all our speakers. Mr. McVey, you did an amazing presentation. I learned so much. I've been in education for over 15 years, but honestly, I was sitting there taking notes and trying to Google on the side. I was learning so much. And so I'm grateful to you for that presentation. Sumaya, I was unable to pop into your room, but I've heard so many great things about you through Dr. Lanzon. So I appreciate you being on our panels today. And then I wanted to also thank Laura, but she's gone already teaching. You guys were all amazing. And Rhonda, as usual, you come and you save the day. You did an amazing job. And
Thank
Dr.
you.
Lanzon,
Thank
you know, we are wishing you the best in Connecticut. I've known you since I was 18 years old. And here I am now on the path of this doctoral research myself, and now part of the faculty. I can't say anything except thank you. Thank you for your guidance, and I'm here where I am today because of God and then you. So I appreciate you so very much. And Henry Ford will not be the same without you, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of been my backpack. But Shema, you're amazing. I've had so many amazing students. I've officially taught over 4,000 teachers how to teach now.
wow.
So it's been amazing. I've had a beautiful time. I could not have asked for anything better. And like Dr. McVey, when I started teaching, I had a degree in theater, and everyone said, you'll never work a day in your life. And I've never been unemployed. I had 3 positions offered to me. I talked to Sumaya when she was my student. I'm like, you need to major in art, Sumaya. And she's like, and then now she does art. So you follow your passion. If you love that English, be that English teacher. You love that math. You love that history. Don't listen to the world. Don't listen to your peers. You do you. You do you. At the end of the day, you're the one who wakes up and you're going to go to that place of employment. I've never called work my work ever. I've always been going to school, or I've been going to the college. I've never said I'm going to work, because when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work.
Makes sense.
It's stressful. We all know that. There's stressful days, but it's not always work. But I do have a question for Katie. Katie, Kelsey, go ahead. I'll wait.
Well, I was just gonna say, I like to tell everybody that I'm going to school just to go to school for the rest of my life.
Amen. I have 5 degrees. You're singing to the choir.
When
I didn't
when I was
finish my PhD till I was 49.
I was at the University of Arizona. Right out of the classroom, I just finished my master's, and I was teaching there. And I said, I had no guidance. So I said, now, how did that person get a PhD? How did I'm smarter than that person? And someone was very kind and said, they're too stupid to stop taking classes. And I said, I'm that stupid. I mean, I could do that too. And you just keep taking the classes and you write the big book report and it's done, right? Shema is it's just call it a big book report. It's not a big thing. Yeah.
Yep. Katie, I have a question. So I'm a former secondary teacher, and I was very project-based. So I'd like to know, like, how have you taught your teachers to move from that project-based to doing projects through online?
Well, I mean, because I guess if you're online at home and not at all in the classroom, you can still find ways to do it. I mean, I would use like group features and still have them be able to communicate and function in groups. It depends whether or not you can get them supplies. I mean, when I was in the classroom, we did project-based, but we had the iPad and we just it just helped collect data, share documents. I mean, when I was in the classroom, we did a collaborative group project between the ELA classes and our science classes for the whole 8th grade. And they weren't in the same, their group would be some students in one class, some student in my class, and they used, you know, their Google Docs to share things, their videos back and forth. And so you can do those same things at home, because we were doing, even like before we were all at home, of doing these huge collaborative projects when they weren't all in the same situation at the same time. So I look at technology as just a way to aid in those situations, add the ways to communicate, add the ways to collaborate back and forth, add in, you know, ways to record things, document things, and put that information together or share that information, publish their information. But they can still do, I mean, obviously if you can get resources to them, provide them, but they can still do those same type of things, whether they're at home, if you have some students at home, in the classroom, you know, combine their groups together and put them in a, Zoom session. The students will do that themselves and put them in groups so they can do all those types of things. And they'll be proud to share their work when they do it. My students loved when they could start video recording and sharing and look what I made, and you know, because one teacher, you can't always walk around the room and see everything. So now they can record their observations, share them with their family, share them at presentations, and they can start that publishing aspect of getting their information out there and working more globally too. So there's lots of ways for them to do that.
Thank you, because I think keeping that creativity with secondary students in this time period is probably very hard.
Okay, last chance. The raffle is coming up soon. So anybody has any final questions, put them forward.
I just want to say, Rhonda, thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
You're welcome. Happy to help you. Happy to help.
Namaste. Thank you. Because I'm telling you, I have lost sleep for weeks.
I know.
And I've been stressed. There's been glitches.
I told you it'd go well, didn't I?
You did. You did. And honestly, I have faith in you. I'm like, she'll take care of it. But I still had nightmares last night. I want to thank all of the people who presented today. I truly appreciate all of your talents. Shema, thank you for moderating. David, thank you for moderating. Thank you for popping in and out of the rooms to see what people are doing and just being there. I want to thank my students for attending. I want to thank everybody else's students for attending. I want to thank outsiders for coming and finding Henry Ford. That's how we recruit here. We host events so we can steal people's students. And on that, I'm just going to say I just really appreciate everybody's participation.